I'm just going to repeat that so that it's caught in the recording piece. So, today the agenda you see here is basically a listing of the topics we want to run through. So you have an idea of what the plan is, what's in it, what the strategies are, what the sectors are that are involved, and then also kind of our looking forward plans. And the point of this presentation is not to bore you for 45 minutes with slides and talking, but to frame it so that we can have a productive question and answer session, and then hopefully a conversation around what it is this community is up to. Yeah, so if we can go to the next slide, I do want to take really an earned community moment that we have a plan. Charlottesville has its first official climate action plan. It's been many years in the works. Then it went into fast forward in terms of development. We had a lot of really amazing and informative and intentional and valued input and engagement. So I do want to thank everybody who participated in that process. A lot of communities have climate action plans. One thing that is unique is that in Charlottesville, our plan was actually formally adopted as an amendment to the comprehensive plan. And that sounds kind of bureaucratic, but it's actually very significant because a comprehensive plan is the roadmap to what the community is tackling and investing in moving forward. So having the climate plan part of the comprehensive plan, I think gives it some really robust legs that is important to the work that's ahead of us. So for anybody who wants to help participate in the sounds, we had a little icon that was supposed to be clapping, but we're going to have to do it ourselves. Okay, thank you. Thanks for humoring us. But yes, we could not have done this ourselves. We did not write this in a silo. This is informed by and informed with a lot of really important input. So we can go to the next slide at kind of a high level to let everyone sort of orient ourselves. The Charlottesville Community Climate Action Plan, it's intended to be a strategic roadmap. It's the what we need to do, not the details of how we do it. It's really important to start us off with what we need to do to meet our climate action goals. And it is a dynamic document. So just because this is the first one doesn't mean it's going to be the last one. It will be updated regularly. We will be working on identifying tangible, measurable sub-goals and other key actions that help us move forward. So the goals that we're talking about, not that I imagine you don't know this already, but the goals are a 45% reduction in emissions by 2030, and then carbon neutrality by 2050. And these goals are scientifically informed based on the IPCC recommendations. So this is the level of commitment that is needed at all scales involved in doing climate work. The plan has a set of what we refer to as guiding principles that we took into consideration when we developed the plan, and these guiding principles apply to every section of the plan and all the strategies and actions. The one I do want to call out is the one you see in this green bar here, and that is that climate action has to be effective, affordable, equitable, and inclusive. And there are other really important guiding principles, but this is one I think we really try to keep front and center so that we don't miss the mark on what we are trying to achieve. So besides the big goals, the ones under the dark blue bar, we have strategies, and the strategies are enduring, which means they are meant to be relevant now and in the future. And then the key actions are the ones that are considered more dynamic. So think of them as the to-do list or the action items. They're the things that we, both the city government as an organization, and we as the wider community will be taking over the next few years. And essentially, as we accomplish things or as we complete things, we cross them off the to-do list. And as part of that dynamic document, they need to be replaced with the next action that really takes its place and requires our attention. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. I'm not asking you to read the gory details on here. We don't need to go into it, but just a reminder about how this document is organized. So beyond the basic introductions, we have guides for actions, and that includes the link that a lot of these strategies and actions have other co-benefits in the community, whether it's clean air or access to food or increased recreational and amenities. There's a whole host. I think we've got a page and a half of bullets that really, if we're doing climate work, we're doing other work that's good for our community, for day-to-day quality of life. So this isn't just for GHG reductions, but we're going to accomplish a lot of other positives alongside. Then there are several sections that present strategies and actions that are community-based, and those address several key areas, and I'll talk to that about in a little bit more. And then really also presenting municipal actions, but also opportunities. The city as a local government has some really unique opportunities to do things in the climate space. And so the document covers some of those. And then obviously at the very end, not only does it include next steps, but we wanted to capture some of the other important topics that go beyond climate mitigation, which is the reduction of emissions, but some of the things that are referred to as drawdown or carbon sequestration, or things that are important from a true sustainability perspective, have maybe a dashed line to climate, but are important to acknowledge as we do this kind of work. All right, so as a reminder, and for context, this is where the greenhouse gas emissions from Charlottesville come from. When you think about what was referred to as our carbon footprint, 95% of the emissions come from activities that are community activities, driving, buildings, waste, things like that. And then 5% can be tied to operations, programs, and services that the city has responsibility for, whether it's our portfolio of buildings, the public transportation component, street lights, those elements that have government control or ability to influence. And then when you look a little further, the proportion of emissions in our greenhouse gas inventory come from these main sectors. So it's a pretty even split, 30%, 30%, 30% from the residential sector, the commercial sector, and the transportation sector, and then a remaining piece from the waste sector. And if you look at this split of emissions in some other communities, you see significant differences, and a lot of that is reflective of what kind of a community it is. If it's a large county with a large urban area, you're going to have a larger transportation footprint. If you have an industrial community in, say, Ohio, you may have a portion of your emissions associated with an industrial sector that we don't really have reflected in Charlottesville. So that's sort of the explanation about why it falls out this way. But what you see here informed the development of the plan, and it informs the areas that our actions need to be focused on. And then also as a reminder and for context, here's just a very simple graph of greenhouse gas emissions from Charlottesville showing where we've been since we were doing inventory work, and then generally where we are now, which is kind of the tail end of that green section, and then where we need to go to meet the 2030 and the 2050 goals. And the general takeaway is we are moving in the right direction. The other takeaway is we got a long way to go. And so it's not that we can just rest on our laurels and say, we're doing a good job, and if we just keep doing this, we'll get there. We need to scale up, and we need to expand scope of what's going on. And that's how we tackled this climate action plan. So when we're talking about reducing emissions from the sources that we talked about, there's three broad ways of doing that. The first one is to reduce the emissions intensity of an activity. So an activity is something like transportation. Reducing the intensity is changing the emissions that come from the moving around. So, or changing the emissions from how a building is operating. So that looks like energy efficiency, switching out light bulbs, upgrading mechanical systems to efficient systems, walking instead of driving, increasing larger public transportation. The second method is what we call fuel switching. So that's essentially where you're changing the source of energy from a current footprint to a lower or a zero emission source. And that looks like switching from an oil-fired boiler to a heat pump. So taking something that's a fossil fuel petroleum product and using a power source that over time, coming from the electric grid, should have a smaller footprint as more renewables are brought onto the grid. Or it looks like installing solar on your house. So even instead of using the electrons that are coming from the grid, you're using full-on solar energy, sunshine electrons in your building. And then the third way to remove emissions is what often is referred to as drawdown, or pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. And so that includes tree planting, other vegetation deployment, but it even includes technology that is called carbon capture and storage, and things which, again, they may not be immediately available or accessible today, but as we talk about goals that are several decades out, we need to be tracking those and seeing where the opportunities are. And then, kind of embedded and entwined in these different ways of reducing emissions, there are funding and financing tools, opportunities, things that we need to be looking at and either building into or linking into that help our residents and businesses access support to do the things, the reduction, the switching, and the drawdown. I think with that, I'm going to hand it over to Emily so that she can talk about some of the strategies in the plan.
Yeah, thank you, Crystal. That was great. So now that you guys have a little bit of background, we can get sort of into the bulk of the plan, which are these strategies that we talked about for reducing emissions. So I'm going to start by talking about the community-based strategies. And this chapter is divided into 5 sections, which you can see up here. So Crystal talked about the difference between the strategies and the key actions, and I'm going to stay kind of on the high-level strategies for reducing emissions in each of these sectors. I think we're going to put a link to the actual plan, and if you want to get into the weeds with all of the many key actions, then we encourage you all to take a look at the plan when you can, and maybe some of you already have. So you can see here, for example, that within the buildings and energy section, we focus both on reducing our emissions through energy efficiency and also fuel switching to renewables. And then in the transportation section, we discuss emissions through driving less, and there are, of course, several ways to do that, and fuel switching by supporting the move to electric vehicles. And the nature-based solutions section, we focus on drawing carbon down out of the atmosphere by protecting and preserving our green spaces. And then, as Crystal mentioned, funding and financing is really a supportive mechanism for supporting the transition through innovative and outside funding sources. And I can tell you that at the moment, with all the federal funding coming, Crystal and I spend a lot of time thinking about, talking about, studying about how we are going to help our community to take the best advantage of those opportunities that are coming. So just as we need to reduce our emissions out in the community, the city also has a responsibility to reduce emissions from our municipal operations as well. And so this slide summarizes the broad strategies that we are either already employing or planning to employ to do that. And so, of course, many of the strategies are the same. For example, energy efficiency for municipal buildings and solar deployment and vehicle electrification. Part of the plan is that the city has a goal of carbon neutrality for all of our city facilities by 2030. And so this will be achieved through energy savings methods, solar, on-site solar, and then also virtual power purchase agreements to buy off-site renewable energy. And so the city also has additional considerations. For example, the need to convert all of our city street lighting and traffic signals to LEDs. And of course, the city owns the natural gas utility for which a decarbonization study is just getting underway. So we have a plan. And so a lot of people are saying kind of like, okay, well, what are you guys going to do now? And plan implementation is underway. We are working to develop measurable success indicators for each key action. Crystal mentioned that. And there's a lot of effort that goes into that because there are so many different types of actions that we need to take. It's not as cut and dry as, you know, each action has sort of a different success indicator that we're working to figure out and also learn how to share with our community, because reporting and accountability is a big part of this. So we want to make sure that we get that right. We have already started working with both our counterparts in other departments within the city and community partners to start moving CAP strategies and actions forward. And that looks like a lot of different coordination efforts. We are working to opt Charlottesville into the state's CPACE program. That's a goal we hope will become a reality in the near term. And of course, I mentioned we spend a lot of time learning about and applying for grants and learning about the federal opportunities. We mentioned that there's a couple of studies that are underway that will inform key actions and next sort of ongoing activities that that's on our docket for 2023 is getting our climate adaptation planning underway. That's a commitment that we have under the Global Covenant of Mayors that we are part of. I'm sure some of the folks in the audience this evening participated in some of our risk and vulnerability assessment work that was done last year, and we're working to push that forward. And so, you know, we acknowledge that we need to all work together to achieve these lofty and really critical goals. And we feel, and we want you all to feel, that this is a community plan. And so that means we want the community to feel ownership over the goals and also empowerment to act towards them. So with that, on that note, you guys are all invited to an event that we're hosting in a few weeks called Acting on Climate Together. So this is going to be a city-sponsored community event, and it's aimed at helping us to sort of paint the landscape or get our arms around the action that's happening out in the community. You know, we know that a lot of people in Charlottesville and the broader area are involved in climate action. And part of the climate plan is being able to report out and you know, measure our success. And so we're really trying to bring the community together to network and learn about what actions are already happening and to share ideas for how we can work together to multiply climate action in our community. So it's designed to be an interactive drop-in event. We won't be doing any presentations like this one, but it's going to be on March 15th from 4 to 7 p.m. at Carver Recreation Center. And like I said, it's a drop-in event. So, you know, if it works for you to come as part of your workday, or if you need to go home and come after dinner, you know, you won't miss anything if you just can come for part of that time. That's how it's designed. So anyway, we hope you all can join us. And that is the end of our formal presentation. So now we will open it up for questions. Let's see. Donna, can you help us with the questions, because I can't see everyone?
Yeah, and I wonder if we want to eliminate the slides and maybe just kind of see everybody as kind of a tile. And for those folks who want to be part of the conversation, if you are inclined to turn your video on, nice to see you.
Great. Okay, I don't see any hands yet. I can start off with a question though. What the heck, to prime the pump? I know that looks like we've had big success in lowering our emissions so far, but I know that part of that is just due to what Dominion's been doing, their share of that's fossil fuel funded, and so that we can't really take credit for that, although it's a happy circumstance. So do you have any idea what percentages of our success has been due to that, or how does that work?
We haven't gone back and calculated what percent is due to it, but I think that there is an understanding, there's got to be an acknowledgement that the city is influenced by outside forces, right? Like if we generated our own power, we would have control over the transition of that power generation to a renewable source, but we don't. And so achieving these goals is going to be influenced by what's happening at the state level, what's happening at the federal level. And so for those of you who are inclined to advocacy is needed at those levels, and not, even advocating to the city is welcome, but that's not the end all be all, because those decisions about grid transformation, the decisions about federal funding, federal priorities, federal programs, those are also influential in us getting to these goals. I'll give you an example. The Clean Car Standard or some of the other vehicle efficiency standards that changed over the past decades, those influenced the carbon footprint of our transportation sector, right? City doesn't set those rules. We are sort of at the will or at the mercy of some of those forces happening outside.
Great. We have a question. When will we have action plans against each of the strategies?
I wish I could tell you we will have them tomorrow, but each of the strategies is sort of complex in their own way. So there's some that I think are easier to kind of build out the steps. And there's others that we just need to get started on. We've never done some of this before. And so we need, like I was telling somebody in a meeting today, it's February 8th. Plan got adopted January 19. We need a hot minute to get our heads straight and to do some of the planning that we need to figure out what we don't want to drop any balls, and we have a lot of big irons in the fire. And so we need a little bit of time to figure those things out. It's important. We're trying to work on a work plan. I think for some folks who listened to some of the meetings last week, there was reference to a climate action plan, work plan. We're working on that. We're hoping to have something that people can see as a reference so that there's accountability. We want to build it out so that it incorporates actions that are happening in the community, because again, the city staff across all the different departments could be doing this a lot, and we only have influence over a certain part of the universe. And so that's why this event in March is we're really excited, because we would like to recognize and understand and spotlight what's already happening, and then figuring out how do we scale up from there.
And another piece of what we're aiming for with our event, as we paint the landscape, get our arms around what climate action is happening in Charlottesville. Another key piece that Crystal and I have been talking about a lot is what if there are gaps, right? Like, we are very much hoping that this will help us to identify any gaps where action is not happening. So, that we can maybe put our efforts towards, like, how are we going to put energy here where there is none?
Yeah, I have a question and a comment. The IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, has introduced a number of tax credits and refunds for heat pumps and windows and increased efficiency and all of that, which started last month. Are you all on top of that or in promoting that with the city residents?
I'm going to take a first stab at the answer. A lot of the guidelines are pending. There is so much detail about how to access these that is yet to be published. In some cases, it's money coming from the federal government that's going to go to the state, maybe the Department of Energy. They've got to develop the programs. They have to figure out the rules. So as soon as we know those, we want to try to connect people with them, but we don't have that information yet. And it's frustrating because there was a lot of excitement built up around, January 2023, these things are going to become available. Well, they kind of are, they also kind of aren't. And so we're talking with colleagues, you know, contacts at the Department of Energy to try to help, you know, I don't know if influence is the right word, but inform and make the state aware of some of the needs. And one of the needs is, how do localities and communities across the Commonwealth help their residents connect with these incentives? That's a statewide need, whether you have a climate plan or not. We want people to be able to get help to help make improvements that are good for them and then good for this type of work. So
Yeah, it's right into your program for climate action.
yeah.
I think it's really important. And for your event, is that strictly a city event, or can groups table at that event, or what? How is it set up?
I can take that one, Crystal. So we have invited some of our colleagues from both Albemarle County and UVA sustainability staff to be at that event with us, because we think that they will benefit from what we hope to learn from the event just as much as we will. And we've also invited a couple of our close community partners to help us with that event. And so we do have some regional coordination going on there. And I wanted to also mention, Kirk, we are already having conversations with partners that we work with in the community to be ready for the IRA funding, and also talking to Crystal mentioned we're talking to the Department of Energy, but also our colleagues in other municipalities all around the state. Like, everyone is working together to try to figure out how to make the best use of these resources that are coming, and so that everyone who is in Crystal and I's position in every municipality is not reinventing the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
This is not a state problem. This is a national problem.
It is.
The programs are national.
Mhm.
And part of where the Biden administration could be doing a better job is if it was putting out some of the education for, okay, parts that you are doing as an income tax deduction. What are the rules? How do you do that? You can get that from the IRS website. It's there, except for the list of automobiles that are qualifying this year. That's only about half there, but for the rest of it, it's there, but it's written in IRS.
Right.
It's friendly.
Right.
Of course, if you are low middle income, you may not have use for a 7K tax reduction. That goes away if you don't, however much you don't use the year you apply for it goes away.
Yeah.
So there's need for a series of webinars. I wrote an email on this subject yesterday to our vice president, figuring she might be freer to carry the ball on this than the president is. And of course, I haven't heard anything, but I think if we deluged her with requests for education on how to use these programs, it might get somewhere.
Yeah. No, it's a really great point. And to Emily's point, we don't all want to be reinventing the wheel. There's got to be some simple choose your own adventure flow charts and some easy ways to help people get to what they need. And I think, Kirk, to your question about inviting other organizations, we are not anticipating this event as a tabling event. There's actually what we're anticipating as an activity event where we can share what we will compile in advance that's already happening, and have a way for people to add to that, what they're doing, organizations they want to support or get involved with. And as Emily said, trying to figure out what's in our plan that nobody's working on. And maybe that doesn't mean we have to do that in the next 6 months, but we need to be aware of the things that nobody's working on and come up with ways to get that worked on.
Right. Well, let me,
Good, thank
if you
you.
can-
One last comment is, how about the UVA coal plant?
I mean,
Yeah,
I think
is there any
UVA is,
resolution on that?
so UVA's got some really progressive goals to carbon fossil fuel free before the city's goals. And so they are working to figure out that equation. And I don't want to speak on their behalf, but they are not naive to the fact that they have a coal plant and that they need to figure out what to do with that in a pretty short order.
Okay,
and
thanks.
I'm going to interrupt here for a second. I have people who type their questions into chat. I'll call on people afterwards, but let's get through some of these first and not just be doing a free for all. So, one of the questions is, can you talk a little bit about the decarbonization study for the gas utility?
I think the best thing I can share is that as to my knowledge, the contract with Black & Veatch, which is the engineering firm that was selected, is working its way through City Hall to get the signatures on the contract. And that the consultants or the engineering firm will be giving a presentation about the scope of work at a work session on March 20th. So those are 4 o'clock work sessions. Public doesn't have the opportunity to make public comment there, but you can attend and listen and learn and have that inform sort of your thinking.
Oops. Okay, Peter, your turn.
All right. The governor and a significant percentage of the General Assembly are trying to remove Virginia from RGGI, and RGGI is providing funding for flood resilience as well as energy efficiency improvements for low-income people. And I was wondering if Charlottesville and Albemarle is there any potential, assuming that it's determined that Virginia cannot leave RGGI legally, is there potential for funding for energy efficiency improvements for low-income residents through RGGI?
I think it's an interesting question. First, I will say that we have, on behalf of the city, submitted public comment about this action, like back when they were first contemplating joining. And then since there's been the threat of pulling out, because the same point about federal legislation and grid transformation, this kind of funding we cannot substitute that level of funding at the local level. I mean, if you think about it, there has been several millions of dollars that have gone to the low income energy efficiency space through some of the organizations doing work in Charlottesville, like PHA, and the city and the county have gotten funding through the Flood Resilience Fund, the Community Flood Prevention Fund, Planning Fund, whatever it's called, CFPF, to fund the studies to do our flood resilience planning, to do some of the updated modeling of the hydrology and the hydraulics of the system. We can't come up that, I mean, the beauty is that's funding that we don't have locally to tackle this kind of important work. So that much more reason that if that source of funding dries up, we've just eliminated critical tools in the toolkit.
Thank you.
Linda.
Yes. My question is around pedestrian safety and how that can help with climate change. I don't want to get too specific, but in my neighborhood, there's a sidewalk that's been promised for 6 years going along the bypass. Actually, 8 years. They said that they would start it 6 years ago. It hasn't appeared yet. And a lot of the crosswalks, even when they are marked with signs, fluorescent signs up, people speed right through them. And I try to be a pedestrian, but sometimes I'm scared to be. And I know that city finances are tight. Do you work with the police department and the other departments, and how would you, is there any kind of plan to resolve this kind of stuff?
We have a lot of relationships to build across departments. And as the city takes on the climate action as a driver to decision making, I think there are going to be increased opportunities to make those connections. I don't today have that working relationship with the police to be able to address this issue immediately. But our climate plan certainly emphasizes the need for improved walkability, bikeability, alternate transportation. So to your point, we need to figure out how to address it. I don't have the answer today, but it's important for those issues to be brought up and to be connected, right? It's about immediate personal safety, but it's also about encouraging more people to feel safe using those modes of getting around.
Should I be contacting city council, or do you have any suggestions on how I can facilitate this becoming more of a higher priority?
I mean, I think communicating with city council is really an important way to get your concerns heard at a decision at the elected level.
Thank you.
And you can email them at council@charlottesville.gov. That goes to everybody on council.
Question, how are we going, you're going to determine the highest priorities, and how are you going to get those initiatives funded? Kind of touched on this, so.
That
Well,
is what Crystal and I do every day.
right. Honestly, we tried to figure out as we were building the plan, let's not put flaky strategies in if they're not going to make a difference. So there's like already a screening that was done by what's in the plan. There are things that we had already requested capital budget for in previous years that we're going to keep working on. And then the city's budget process is how we're going to look for internal funding, whether that's through the capital program. So that's for things like LED streetlight conversion, really significant energy performance work, or solar deployment on city and school buildings. Those are things that we're going to continue to request for funding, and that, the community can make it known that they want that kind of investment done by the decision makers. We also we ask through the operating budget, which is our annual budget, we've asked for increased staff capacity because there's a lot of work to do. And at the end of the day, there's more to do than we have bodies to make sure it all gets done at the pace it needs to happen. And we are looking hard outside the city organization for external funding. We've just put a concept paper in for some grant funding through Federal Department of Energy. If we would be successful, we might be able to bring in $8 or $9 million. We can't find that money locally. There's so many competing priorities, but we're entering this like 5 to 10 year window that there's going to be some transformational funding opportunities to do this work. But we can't be grant writing and doing work and doing all the other things. So hence, the capacity is a limiting factor. But yeah.
And I just want to add one more thing about that. Remember at the very beginning of this presentation, Crystal mentioned that now the climate action plan is part of the comprehensive plan. It's our hope that that really gives the climate plan the extra like oomph and the extra strong legs to compete with other city priorities, because it is part of the comprehensive plan, and that is how decisions get made in this city.
So Judy Olser is asking if you're partnering with Charlottesville area tree stewards.
We have, I think, partnering. I don't know that we can say like today we're partnering. We have had some really good, productive conversations with the Tree Commission. I know the Tree Commission has connections with the tree stewards. The one thing that we want to say, and maybe the way we're saying it isn't quite as effective, but there is nothing that stops anybody in the community from doing climate action. You don't have to come and get city permission. Like, go do climate action. So if the tree stewards want to do work, if the Sierra Club wants to tackle stuff, any nonprofit wants to do, you do not need to get city permission. we would love to know what you're doing, but a lot of this work can be done by the community. We can help, the city can be involved, the city can be a partner, the city can be, but the city can't pay for everything that needs to happen. And the city doesn't need to, we don't need to mess things up if other people have smart, nimble, effective ways of getting work done.
When we were talking about the importance of networking at the event that we're hosting in a few weeks, that's the kind of thing that we're imagining, maybe, of course, I know the tree stewards and the tree commission know each other, but do they know Relief, and do they know the master gardeners, and how can those folks get together and take care of the trees that are getting planted? Or there are so many things and opportunities for partnerships and thinking of new ways to work together. And, we're hoping to foster that a bit, because that's what it's going to take. Some really creative thinking.
No, I hope we all can do that. Question from Rabbi Alexander. Could you speak to the possibility of electrifying the CAT fleet, given the director's announced preference for CNG vehicles?
So CAT is currently in the midst of a alternative fuels vehicle study. And I understand that, various technologies, CNG and electric, and I think some consideration of hydrogen are on the table. And they're currently looking at routes and frequencies and some different scenarios. I'm not 100% sure when that study will be completed. I had heard reference to this spring, but there's a lot that's been going on, so I don't want to say it will be done in the spring. They're aiming. It's work underway. I think there's a lot of, I know there are some really great examples around the state of other communities that have electrified their public transportation, whether it's Alexandria or Blacksburg, I think maybe Harrisonburg. And then there are other communities like Arlington that a decade ago went from diesel to CNG and are now looking to go from CNG to electric. So I think there's some really compelling regional examples that will inform some of the considerations. But we've got to, it's in our plan that we think that electrifying the bus fleet is a key action.
Martha, you had your hand up. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question. I had written it in earlier. It has to do with what are you all able to do with the rezoning activities, particularly as it involves the redensification or the densification of properties. I'm concerned about the tree canopies being further destroyed, and I see that happening in the residential areas. Last week, I saw 8 new trees down in Rugby Hills and Fry Springs 1 week. And so there's clearly not a general awareness in the public about this, or they're expanding, in some cases, some bad branches to take the whole tree down instead. So I'm just wondering if you're involved with that process to prevent that from being an ongoing issue. Thank you.
Martha, we have had, if you look at the end of the climate plan, there's a section that talks about links between what's in the plan and the zoning update work. And there are a number of things in the plan that are connected to tree canopy and to other, nature-based goals. I know that there's been a lot of comments and feedback on the zoning ordinance that try to highlight the importance of trees. And there's this, there's only so much space, and there's so many things that everybody wants in that same space. I think it's going to be a challenge, and I don't have the answer yet. I know that the zoning ordinance team is looking at tools that are going to be more effective than what we have now to do tree protection. That process is underway. So I would encourage you to let that, engage in that process, submit comments or questions so that it stays on the radar. that's really, and I think your name is familiar, so I think you have been participating in that process, but keep at it.
I'm a member of the Tree Commission, and we're just giving a state of the urban forest report to council this month anyway. And yeah, the news is not good, and hopefully that will hit harder than it hit the last time. Susan McKinnon asks, will there be a set of strategies and actions developed to deal with the risks and vulnerabilities report that the city did recently?
Well, there was let's back up. One of the first steps that was done was to identify the key hazards. And so that work was done, I think, in the late springtime, early summer. And then there were a couple of town halls held to try and get, community participant response and feedback and thoughts around, like, what are those risks and what are the vulnerable communities, and sort of idea generating. We have some preliminary, I guess, risk assessment work, but really there's quite a bit that's left to do on that. But we are going to be moving, I think Emily mentioned this earlier, we're going to be moving into another planning exercise to really look at what are the strategies and actions that are relevant or related to adaptation and resilience. But as like a preview to that, if you look at the climate plan, there's a little icon that looks like a little globe that is noted throughout the document when there's a section or a strategy or an action that is relevant both to climate mitigation, climate adaptation. So there's some things that if we do, we're tackling both issues, and we thought it would be helpful to already note those in this document, and then those will, they'll be built, there'll be other strategies and actions that build upon that. But you could already look through the document and just do a search for that little icon.
Hey, Marcia asks about the status of the new climate staff. I know it sounded like at City Council meeting Monday night that there were lots of new staff was just being put on the back burner. So should we be sad? I mean, worried about that? Is that going to be a huge problem?
This is being recorded, so all I can say is I appreciate you continuing to say publicly that staff is a good, helpful thing to moving this forward.
But I think the answer to Marcia's question is the manager position will be filled. That is not a position that we have to get funding for. That's not a new position. So that is out in the public. We're like soliciting people to apply for that position, and it's open until Friday.
Right, but at the council meeting, it really sounded like they have budgeted for everything except the 28 new positions being asked for across city departments. And there was a great deal of confusion about what to do about that. Certainly, but the city manager was saying, email the city manager. I keep track of what the public wants.
Mm-hmm.
We can do that.
Mm-hmm.
We should.
Yep. I mean, I think we're not the only ones in the city asking for new staff for added capacity. There's requests coming from multiple departments for multiple, important work. And so the city manager and the electeds have hard decisions to make. All we can do is make the best case for why our requests are really relevant and timely.
But some of those other departments are better known to city council and to city manager and his immediate staff because the city gives them money, funding. And we have not been on the radar as much. So we need to speak up. We don't have the habit of banging on council, and that's needed at this time. That's my opinion anyway. You're smiling, Crystal. I think you agree.
I think that I'm going to say personally and professionally, I do feel like this work has a lot of support from the community, and I think our decision makers are sensing that. Right? It's maybe there's a history of it not being the priority, but I see it now in a budget presentation. I see climate action listed as one of the 6 or 7 things that are driving decisions. That's new. And that's, I think, very important for us to recognize. That's progress.
And the climate went crazy all over the world, and people are noticing.
Yeah, and I'm not able to grab the link to the plan itself. I think Donna said she was going to put it in, but if you click on it, because it's a kind of a clunky document, it takes quite a while to load as a PDF. I will give, we are working with a firm to try and take the Word version that is currently available and turn it into a more of a professional looking document that is a bit easier to digest, just because it's, I don't know, prettier. It's got some easier ways to get through it. And we're also trying to work on what I would refer to as our Cliff Notes version. So something that is in the 10 to 14 page range, so that, folks who want to get a sense of what's in there, but they have no desire to read 100 pages. We would like to have something in a format that's easy that way. And if we can pull it off, also just like a short little 2-page brochure. Again, just to give people a sense of like what it is, what it covers, that we're working on things moving forward. So we totally hear that it's one thing to have developed the plan. It's another thing to implement it. And the more people understand what's in it, and the more people understand opportunities and roles and all that, the more likely we'll get stuff done. And to the extent that we are expected to report out on progress, that progress can't be limited to just what the city's doing. We'd love to sort of honor and acknowledge and respect that a lot of people are doing a lot of work. And make it contagious, right? Like, let's normalize climate work. Let's make it like not just the 24 people who are in this meeting, but that everybody's talking about climate all the time, and it's normal. If you live or work or play in Charlottesville, you care about this stuff and you do this kind of work. And you'll sleep better at night.
One last question, and I think then we can maybe wrap this up. But this is from Diane Zaplarski. Since 30% of greenhouse gases arise from residential, how can the building codes be modified to ensure new construction is green, i.e. high levels of insulation, no gas hookups, high efficiency heat pumps, etc.? Of course, we have the Dillon rule here.
So the quick and easy answer is building codes in Virginia are adopted at the state level. And because we are what is referred to as a Dillon rule state, if the authority isn't specifically given to the locality, we can't set rules that are stricter. And so that's where we're stuck. So if you want to see changes in the building code, you need to be communicating that to Department of Housing and Community Development, DHCD. And they're the ones who adopt the stricter building codes. That process is underway. There are always people who are advocating for stricter building codes, and there are always people who are advocating to stay several steps behind because it's more profitable for some people. And so that's just, there's a lot of tension there. But I agree, we can't require it, and so we have to make it desirable or relevant by educating folks, making it easy, raising awareness, maybe coming up with ways to support those pieces. So to that extent, if there are groups out there that can help with that, that's helpful.
And just to add to that specifically about building codes, there's $1 billion in the IRA for states to update their building codes. So advocate at the state level for Virginia to try to take advantage of some of that money. It might be a little late in the game for this General Assembly session, but that money will be distributed over the next couple of years. And that's where it'll need to happen from this, it'll have to happen at the state level, and with federal money available, maybe it could get some bipartisan support. So I know there's a lot of advocates in this group. That would be a good thing to advocate at the state level for.
My rudimentary understanding of funding opportunities for localities is that there's kind of a magic number in terms of population of around 200,000. Are you coordinating with Albemarle County perhaps to apply as a block or as a group for some of the funding opportunities?
I think it depends. If you're talking, there's a funding opportunity called the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant. And it's what's referred to as a formula allocation. So it is influenced by your population size. And 200,000 is a number that is relevant for counties. It's a smaller number for cities. And so the county will get an allocation and the city will get an allocation. And I will tell you, the allocation is kind of small. I think it's under $100,000 each. But there are efforts underway to think about, is there a collective kind of project that a number of localities that are getting these small allocations could pool the money and sort of leverage a bigger outcome. And maybe that's something we can work with the state on. Maybe that's something we have to go it alone. We're definitely trying to figure out. We work a lot with Albemarle County. I mean, a lot of our organizations work across the two localities. You know, businesses have customers from both localities. There's a lot of reasons why, you know, climate impacts don't care where jurisdictional boundaries are. They have a small staff, we have a small staff. If we could do 1 + 2 = 1 + 1 = 3, that would be nice. So that's what we're working on.
Well, thank you, Crystal and Emily. This has been a really great talk, and you've been very patient with so many questions from all different departments here. But well, we've been so glad to have you, and so glad to get the experience and your wisdom about what's going on. And we will look forward to seeing you on March 15th. At Carver Rec Center from 4 to 7. So hopefully we can all come by and put in our 2 cents and find out more and bring our friends and family and all start working on climate ourselves, not just making you two just do all the heavy lifting. So thank you so much, everybody. And thank you for tuning in, folks. We'll be having a couple more programs coming up in March, and we will get the word out shortly. So
before we go, Don, concerning programs next month, we're hoping to have the county staff in to talk about the upcoming comp plan update, which is underway right now. So stay tuned for that.
we're having a program at Caterpillar, so yahoo! It's a little lighter subject better.
Yeah, but thanks for having us, and thanks for the questions, and thanks for thinking about it and showing up. And
Thank you for being engaged. Thank you for going out and trying to multiply climate action in our community. And thank you for having us.
Well, good. And take a look. A journalist just put in her phone number down there, and we want to, anybody else wants to reach out to them, I will leave this up. So thank you, folks.
all right, bye, good night.
Bye.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.